Let's look at cities as living laboratories again. Okay, so this is showing, cities as living laboratories. Political theorist Ben Barber called cities as the coolest political institutions on earth. If you start thinking that way, we have already mentioned before that cities are innovation hubs, financial centers, employment opportunities, opportunities for innovation, growth, and so on, and of course culture, right? But also in the context of climate change and climate action, cities experience very specific problems of extreme events, health, transport, resources like water, electricity, and so on. The Global Parliament of Mayors, which was started, I think, in 2015 or so by Ben Barber, talks about rethinking the city, how mayors respond to the needs of a post-COVID city, for example. So that's the cutting edge problem. It's a global parliament of mayors, governance body of, by, and for mayors from all continents with a vision to the world in which mayors, their cities, and networks are equal partners in building global governance for an inclusive and sustainable world. The mission is to convene Global Parliament of Mayors to facilitate debates between mayors, national governments, and international organizations, drive systematic action to take global and national challenges, and opportunities to achieve political change on a global scale. Okay, you're going from cities and mayors, but collective action at the global scale. Mayors take leadership and ownership of the global challenges that they face at a local level. So what better example than climate change, right? A global challenge with local manifestations. So I want to read these because this is fantastic example from Colombia and Brazil, places that are generally developing countries, but they grew bottom-up grassroots solutions with citizens' involvement based on leadership of a couple of visionaries. Okay, so Antanas Mocas became a mayor of Bogota, Colombia, during its most intense period of violence in the late 90s and early 2000s, and he declared urban transformation begins not with law and order and not with new infrastructure that would come later, but with civic strategies designed to transform social attitudes, norms, and behavior, to change the hearts and minds collectively and individually. So this is not some great professor of Harvard or UC system. This was a guy who became a mayor with a vision, and he made things happen. Among the things he did was to give people these cards which showed a thumbs up or thumbs down, and he encouraged people to use thumbs to express approval and disapproval of one another's behavior. As you can imagine, there was a lot of cynicism when he started it, but soon people began to change behavior because they figured out that this was a good non-confrontational way to do things of expressing approval and disapproval. So he became legendary for the distinctive ways he intervened in the behavioral dysfunction of urban Bogota, using Bogota, using I think this A with the accent on top is the emphasis, so it will be Bogota, using the arts, culture, and sometimes outrageous performative interventions to dramatically reduce violence and lawlessness, reconnect citizens with their government and with each other, increase tax collection, reduce water consumption, and ultimately improve the quality of life for the poor. Incredible, right? The mayor that followed him, Enrique Peñalosa, renowned green infrastructural interventions came during his mayorship, and he said something really amazing. We don't even think about it. He said, a developed country is not a place where rich own cars, but it's a place where the rich ride public transportation. If you think about the US, there is an anathema against public transportation except in some big cities like New York or DC or San Francisco and Chicago and so on. But most of the vast country, it's a huge country, and it just doesn't provide sufficient public transportation. It could be zipping across in fast trains up and down California, up and down the East Coast, in the middle, across, and so on. But there is just some cultural baggage that makes them not own up public transportation. So social norms began to change under Mockus. Public trust began to emerge. All of these guys were influenced by Paulo Freire, a Brazilian educator and philosopher who wrote The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. So Freire was very keen on the upliftment of the oppressed. And there's terms like social urbanism evolved out of there. And they in fact think the social urbanism is the key to coexistence. So you have to live together, the very rich and the very poor. We looked at one image of the Mumbai slums with very tall, very lush, luxurious apartment buildings, high rises on the one side, and these incredibly miserably cramped shanties in the middle. There is lots of industrial activity in those slums. They have a thriving economy, but yet the sanitation, power, wastewater treatment, etc. can be an issue. So social urbanism tends to want to solve those kinds of problems. So Paulo Freire talked about dialogue, praxis. This is practical actions we will see in a minute, and education. So perhaps the most influential thinker about education in the late 20th century, Paulo Freire, has been particularly popular with informal educators with his emphasis on dialogue and his concern for the oppressed. Okay, praxis is doing or activity as defined by Smith. Praxis was not mindless activity but deliberative, responsible, human moral action which involved the process of wise judgment. Okay, so this informal education basically goes back to the teach-in idea we talked about, or the idea that universities must come down from the ivory tower and learn what they can from the communities and not just think that they are empty vessels of knowledge, right? Okay, so there is action, reflection, and theory. That's the idea of praxis from this sustaining community WordPress article. Okay, so I hope it gives you an idea of how cities are organizing, collaborating, and have the history of solving problems, even though here and there, but how can you codify it? How can you combine cities with universities' abilities to find solutions, evolve cultures of collaboration, create social innovations and social transformations? That's what we'll look at a little bit.